Hello, Year 12 Bio. Today we're going to be taking a look at how plants respond to disease as we continue in our infectious disease module. All right. This video is to give an introduction to the start of the second inquiry question, where we're going to be looking at how the bodies of plants and animals actually respond to pathogens, and how they respond to infection of their tissues and cells by foreign organisms. Okay. Alrighty. So what we have here in this presentation, it's only a little short and sweet one today. All right, is I've actually got a number of really helpful reference posters for plant diseases that I have linked in my lesson materials and on this Google Classroom lesson. All right, and I've just kind of chopped them up at the start of this presentation. All right, plants are awesome, people. Okay, and one of the things to be mindful of is that plants, they really, really are awesome. All right, most plants stay in one spot. All right, they might, as part of their reproductive cycle, spread, seeds and stuff like that around. Okay, and pollen around and stuff like that. But what they do is most plants, they have roots, they're anchored in the ground, and if they have a problem, they have to deal with it. All right? That's why you have adaptations like thorny bristles and stuff like that on a number of plants to stop animals like herbivores, like cows, from munching on them. Okay? All right? Same deal when it comes to disease-causing organisms, pathogens. Plants have a number of specific adaptations that they have evolved over time to actually prevent pathogens from infecting their tissue and their cells. Okay, so in the case of plants, it's a never-ending war between the plant and invading pathogens. They're constantly exposed to pathogenic organisms. Okay, and this war, this never-ending battle between plants and pathogens. Okay, this is the status quo. All right. One of the things that you might not be aware of is that everything in the environment is constantly exposed to large numbers of pathogenic organisms. Okay. Now, many of the ones we're exposed to by number would actually be ones that are bacteriophages, so viruses that go after bacteria, not necessarily a problem for us. But we have many, many types of pathogens that are actually affecting all living things on the world. Okay. All right. So one of the things to understand is that there's a lot of near misses, all right, for all living things. But the other thing is that this is part of the status quo. It's part of the life cycle of these pathogenic organisms. All right. Our protists, our bacteria, our fungi, and our viruses, they just want to reproduce. All right. And they need other organisms, their parasites, to do that. Alrighty. But life has a way of protecting itself, and plants have some really cool adaptations to actually fight back against pathogens. Now, plants, because they can't move, their adaptations start with basically making a fortress out of themselves. All right. And so that means they have structural and chemical barriers that actually stop pathogens from getting in. One of the most important is the cuticle, which is a waxy outer coating on the leaves and stem of plants that actually prevent pathogens from getting inside the tissues and the cells. Okay, it's a tough barrier, as are cell walls. The tough cell walls can actually stop pathogens from getting inside the plant cells as well. And so what that means is that attacking pathogens, for them to actually get into the plant, they need to have a way of, as they are carried through the environment on the wind or in water or via infected insects or any other material, they need to actually get into the plant. Now, that can be through openings because of external wounds on the plant, or maybe the open stromata on the underside of leaves, or they need to have an adaptation themselves that lets them puncture or dissolve their way into the plant tissue to actually infect the plant. All right. But once inside, the plant doesn't just give up. Okay. The pathogens, once they've infected the plant, they need to consolidate, they need to reproduce, they need to steal food from the plant cells. All right, viruses need to make copies of themselves. All right, they need to reproduce, they need to take over, they need to use the awesome and easy to live in environment of the plant to survive and reproduce. All right, plants, however, can fight back. All right, and what plants have is a number of chemical defenses. And they use these chemical defenses to deactivate or destroy pathogens. All right, plants can make a number of antimicrobial substances, all right, or strengthen their cell walls to actually stop infection spreading from cell to cell. All right, one of the kind of most cool things that plant cells actually do is that when a plant identifies an infected cell, it can actually do programmed cell death in the surrounding cells and actually create a wall of dead cells surrounding the infected cell to stop that cell from being able to pass on the pathogen to surrounding cells. Okay, which is pretty cool. All right, so if we take a look at a number of examples of plant adaptations, we've already spoken about the waxy cuticle, which is a structural barrier to prevent the access of pathogens. We have lignin, which part of a chemical barrier. It's a macromolecule that makes up the woody tissue of plants. And this will access a bit of a barrier for actually letting pathogens into the organism. We have the production of a variety of toxic chemicals. All right, this includes enzymes, all right, that can either turn on and program cell death or can otherwise inactivate or destroy pathogens. Okay. And we also have the production of toxins such as citronella to repel insects and other ectoparasites. So we have these chemical and structural adaptations that actually are deployed by plants to defend themselves. All right, so if we change gears here and we flip this to look at animals, okay, unlike plants, animals move around. All right, that's a number of advantages for us as animals and other animals in that you can move away from places where you would be exposed to disease-causing pathogens. But there's also an advantage for pathogens because once they've infected one of us, we can move towards, if we're social, other animals, and they can spread and infect other animals. Okay, so typically what that means is that animals often have a little bit more of a complex defense system than plants. Okay, all right, because we can't just become a fortress. All right, and perhaps one of the most common examples of a adaptation that all animals have is an outer barrier skin, all right, to keep pathogens out, actually having a defined outside and inside. Okay, all right, that's important. All right, so our responses in terms of our responses to pathogens, they can either be innate or non-specific adaptations that are about keeping pathogens out or dealing with particles that are not meant to be present in our bodies. Okay, and the other one can be specific adapted responses that are specific to particular pathogens, and they enable our body to identify and mount an immune response to actually fight that pathogen off. All right, that's why in examples like with the current COVID-19 pandemic, once someone has been infected, there is a greater chance that if they were reinfected later on, that their body would be able to fight that off. That is not 100% of the case all the time, all right, but it is part of how our bodies work in terms of our adaptive immune response. Okay, so for the rest of this lesson, what you're going to be doing is you're going to be conducting some research to analyze the responses of animal cells and tissues to the presence of pathogens. Basically, you're going to be making a summary table like the one on the prior slide of this presentation for plants. Here's an example, all right? And what you're going to do is you're going to break it down and take a look at the different defense systems of animals, okay? And you're going to need to take a look at that in terms of whether or not they are a structural adaptation, a chemical adaptation, or a behavioral adaptation. Okay. All right. Remember, we have some linked resources in the notes, in the lesson materials, and in the Google Classroom outline for this lesson. And a good place to start is to read the Pearson text, pages 413 to 418, about the animal responses to pathogens. All right, guys, let's get on with the lesson, and I'll talk to you next time. Bye.